My boss looked like he was about to lose it. I don't know how to think about the client's interests anymore. We just have to speak the truth. Whether we make money or not is a different story. Then my boss asked his soul-searching question I didn't understand. An agent has to think about the client. How can you not tell the truth? My boss asked if I knew the cost. I said yes. He asked how I knew. I thought I was helping, but realized I might be foolish. Maybe in a few years, when he's frustrated, I'll be sneezing. I was pondering that question, like when asked about a project's earnings. Some projects can be profitable if lucky, but not all are. Bad projects lose money too. I don't discuss specific numbers. I prefer saying I made. Not every project is profitable. Bad projects can lose money. I don't discuss specific numbers. Each project has its own scale. Focusing on absolute numbers can mislead. In our work, money is hard-earned. This thing makes so much money. Well, actually. And another thing is that it will make people misunderstand, saying that it seems very easy to make money. These things. Say, Tim, you should make money quickly. Then teach me. Isn't this the truth, right? Make money. The money we earn in this industry is hard-earned. For example, I recently worked on a project, spending 100 grand, but it's been dragging for months and might not happen. So, I'm down 100 grand. Is this the first time? No, there are many risks. Have you ever lost money like this? Before, I lost 40 grand in 2021 and another 20 grand later. Now, I've put in 100 grand and it seems wasted. In real business, projects are bigger and sometimes professionals are needed. I had tried to buy a deal before, but failed and lost 40,000 yuan. That was in 2021. The other one was about 20 grand, and this is the third time. I've missed out on a deal, having spent around 100 grand, which basically just went down the drain, right? So, because of the nature of real business, projects are generally larger, and sometimes you have to bring in professionals to help out. I know how to handle projects, but a lot of the specialized stuff is better left to the experts, right? Like, for example, things like gold appraisal reports have to be done by third-party people. Right, okay.
Ah, that's the kind. So, that thing. You mentioned earlier about the 40 grand is non-refundable, right? Right. Right, okay, so that's how it is. To manage project risks, you spent 100 grand. What's the status? Is it still ongoing? It seems unlikely to happen. Did you raise funds before or use your own money? Typically, all project funds should be our own,
Okay first, probably.
but it is highly likely that it has not been lost. Okay, did you do it yourself? Before you raised funds, or have you already started with all your own money? This is how we usually do it. When we look at a project, we must use all our own money.
Once the project is confirmed, we prepare for fundraising. If needed, not all projects require it, as we often use our own funds. In commercial real estate, there aren't many Chinese professionals, which can lead to funding shortages. Everyone needs funds, even for big projects. Does this relate to your social media work? Are you using platforms like Zaihangshu? It's part of my approach, which I find important.
If there are not many Chinese people, will you lack funds? Everyone lacks funds. Even if you do it, no matter how big it is, you still lack funds. That's okay. No one doesn't lack money. Does this have anything to do with your own media? You would hope to do it through, for example, Zaihangshu.
Doing video accounts is part of increasing my funding options. I think my approach to social media is like this. I feel it's important because I'm currently at the end of 2014. Last year, at the end of 2020, after the first wave of the pandemic, I went back to China and noticed some really alarming things like customer acquisition anxiety. And in every industry, whether it's emerging or traditional, everyone is using social media. Getting customers, right? But customer acquisition itself is like, I've realized that if you don't integrate with Smelly, you're basically dead in the water. You won't have any competitive advantage. The same thing will happen in the US in the future, right? I just feel like it's going to be like that. Yesterday, we were. 2 days ago, I was in a small town in North Carolina. I have a self-storage facility there with a manager who has 2 kids, aged 6 and 10. He mentioned his kids are on TikTok daily, and he's helping his 10-year-old start vlogging with gaming commentary. This is the future, even in small towns. It's not about fundraising. It's about embracing change. I run a traditional business, and technology doesn't really affect us, but it's important to adapt. He's getting ready to help his 10-year-old kid make gaming commentary vlogs. Yeah, this is the future, right? He's in a really, really small town in America. Not a big city. Not like New York or anything. Just a tiny little place. So, this is the future, no doubt about it. I think the most beautiful thing about this is that it's not just about fundraising or anything like that. Those are all secondary issues. The real question is whether you're willing to embrace it or not. I mean, I run a traditional business. And to be honest, technology doesn't really touch what we do. And honestly, I'm not that sensitive to tech either. You see, with all this media equipment, what kind of filming gear should I buy? Right? A couple of days ago, I got those Meta glasses. I don't know how to use it correctly now, so it's just. But there's nothing I can do because this means that it's just one thing. That TikTok you mentioned. TikTok is actually not a good thing. It's a spiritual opium, right? It's a spiritual opium, but there's nothing I can do. This is how society is. Whether it is progress or regression, society is like this, and what we can do is embrace this change. As a person in a traditional industry, I can embrace some changes, but I don't know whether this change is good or not. We can only embrace it and cannot resist it, just like cryptocurrency. Right. But now I'm starting to think about it, especially after it broke 100 grand yesterday, right? I really feel like this is crazy because the first time I heard about cryptocurrency was back in college over a decade ago when I saw the front page of the Wall Street Journal talking about some digital currency. $1 per digital currency in 2011 or 2012. A Wall Street Journal article caught my attention, but I dismissed it. Later, many started buying and trading it. Friends made a lot of money, 8 or 9 figures. I don't get it and won't invest in what I don't understand. Now, I'm considering it. I attended a private gathering by a foreign exchange bank. Investing or whatever, right? I have friends who made a ton of money last year and this year, maybe even 8 or 9 figures, but that's their understanding of it. For me, I don't get it, and honestly, I don't dare to invest in things I don't understand. But now I'm still thinking about it, right? So a couple of years ago, I even went to a private gathering hosted by a foreign exchange bank. So what about it? This is the CEO of HSBC for the whole of the US. That guy is an old man, over 60. He came here, talking about the global situation, saying that their clients are all over the world. In this market, they help clients with asset allocations. In the next decade, $19 trillion will pass from the older to the younger generation. The younger generation now invests in cryptocurrency, not traditional assets. There's buzz about something based on big data. It's the new generation, right? Like young people, their approach to investing is not about buying real estate or mutual funds anymore. That's all very traditional. It seems like their investment strategy has shifted. What are they buying? They're buying cryptocurrency, right? There's even another term I heard from a friend that I suddenly forgot. Recently, there's been this really hot thing called, I don't even know what it is. It's not a gambling platform. It's based on big data. They provide you with a lot of data so you can predict many things, like on battle.net, for example, the US elections and stuff. Right? Okay, just a couple of days ago, someone said. You might think it's gambling, but for young people, it's more like
Investment strategies. A couple of days ago, during the presidential election, I remember Robinhood had this feature where you could bet on who would be president. Was it possible to bet on Trump? Or was it just the odds, like regular football betting?
Yeah, exactly. You can hold on to it for many years. The new generation sees it as a way to allocate assets or manage their finances. So real estate is just one part of it, right? Even though it's a traditional industry, we still have to embrace the changes of the future. There's no way around it. If you don't move forward, you'll fall behind. A lot of people in real estate are realizing this.
Especially in the multifamily sector, people like you often talk about your love for technology and how you just apply it, right? Like what kind of tech have you used? For example, when we do home inspections, how do we go about it? We can fix up 200 houses in no time, or, for example, before. If you wanted to check the roof, you had to climb up there, but now we just use drones. It's not just that. There are all kinds of smart indoor devices and stuff like that, like what you have.
Honestly, I'm not really into technology. When I was younger and in school, I loved it. But then I realized that technology is advancing way too fast, and you just can't keep up. Using business and commerce, there's really no way around it, but you have to keep up with the big trends, like self-media. Right? So, back to self-media. Let me introduce myself a bit. What do you mainly focus on? Commercial real estate. That way, people will have some idea about you and feel a sense of authority. So, I'll quickly share my background. I came to the US in 2007. I graduated and moved to the US for my studies at USC. I studied accounting and business. I chose accounting because classmates said jobs were easy to find. I regretted it after half a year as I didn't want to be an accountant. But I had no choice. Setting up a school was costly, and I had practiced for a semester. So I got 2 degrees. I graduated in 2012, just when the financial crisis had just passed. It's a good thing, but it's not a good thing. How should I put it? Well, for real estate, the financial crisis was actually the best time to enter the market, right? Right, but actually, I didn't do that. I graduated in 2012, which was considered a low point, but I chose a different path. After graduating, I didn't want to work. I wanted to start my own business. I don't know if you remember, but back in 2011 and 2012, there was this global wave of entrepreneurship. Every day it was all about mobile internet. What was I supposed to do with it? Facebook and all that stuff. I wanted to start my own business. I didn't want to work for someone else. I ended up checking out 5 or 6 different companies and tried a bit of everything. I tried buying medical gloves, doing SEO, and all sorts of random stuff. But in the end, none of it worked out. You were too young. In the end, I ended up working for a real estate investment company, Flipkart, a few years after I graduated. I started 5 or 6 companies in a year and a half, which was not easy. I tried and failed quickly, so you were very fast. I also, unfortunately, lost a significant amount of money during that time. I was just young and didn't know any better. At that point in my life, I thought I needed to find a good job, but I felt like no one would want to hire me. So back then, I went to work at a friend's company. They specialized in flipping houses, which is pretty well known, buying old houses, renovating them, and then selling them. You know, it was a single family home. And at that time, it was in a really rough area, also in California, right? Yeah, exactly. I worked there for about 3 months and felt like it was time to move on. The reason I decided to become an agent was that one day, a broker came to my friend's company. He is a Mexican. He doesn't speak English, and he can't read, but he helps my friend's company find projects. I was looking for deals. My friend said he paid a broker 100 grand a year. Back in early 2013, hearing that, I thought, wow, that's a lot. I figured I could find deals too, since I speak English and read. I decided to get my license in Beijing, not wanting to sell houses. But selling wasn't easy. Weekly open houses felt unprofessional, and others weren't doing it right. I wanted out, but it was tough. Eventually, I got lucky and found an opportunity. Every week, you have to hold open houses, and you feel in charge. Others aren't doing it right. They're not professionals. I was just thinking about how to get out of that place and figure things out, but there wasn't much I could do. To be honest, in the end, I stumbled upon an opportunity and ended up going for it. CB. I.e.,
In Chinese, it's the largest in the US. What's the Chinese name? Is this the first time you're hearing it in Chinese? Because it's pretty big. I knew CBRE, but not the full name. Since CBRE is a bit strange, what's its full name? It's CB something. Richard Ellis, his old name. Now it's CB Richard Ellis. CB Richard Ellis. 2 companies merged. RE means real estate, right?
Richard Ellis, sorry, that was his old name. He should be called by his full name now, and his official name is CB Richard Ellis.
CB Richard Ellis. It is a merger of 2 companies. What does RE stand for in real estate?
CBRE stands for Richard Ellis, not real estate. The name is from 100 years ago when 2 companies merged. It's about merging ideas. I joined this company, specializing in buying and selling multifamily units. I worked there for nearly 4 years, focusing on investment-type multifamily apartments. Okay, not all foreign companies use their own surnames, but it's like this when put together. Anyway, I ended up going to this company by accident. This company specializes in buying and selling multifamily apartments. So I actually did this for almost 4 years, 3 years and 11 months, helping clients buy and sell mainly, focusing on investment-type multifamily apartments. After 4 years, it was a typical experience. After working for 4 years, you see how clients invest, learn from their successes and failures. At the end of 2018 and the beginning of 2019, I was also investing, but it was mostly passive investing. Invested in large projects in Asia Pacific. In 2017, buying and selling them in 2017. In 12 months, as a passive investor, I made a 41% return. The market thrived and operators took profits, yet I still made 41%. I thought, with such a good market, I could succeed too. From 2016 to 2018, the market. Before the pandemic, the market thrived, especially in 2016 to 2018. Inspired by clients, I quit my job to invest full-time with a former client. We've been investing since 2019, seeing growth in various properties. The market in Atlanta, Phoenix, and Texas was really, really good. So, I just watched how my clients were doing things and thought, hey, I could do this too. That's when I decided to quit my job and go full-time. My partner is actually someone who was a client of mine before.
We've been working together from 2019 until now, and we've been full-time investors for about 6 years. When it comes to personal growth, you've definitely seen a lot of classic cases. There are people who do single-family homes, commercial properties, multi-family units, and storage. Many people have gone through various experiences, and some, like you, end up becoming investors. AR, active investors, or even, they do these things themselves, right? To do investment. Some brokers, they will always be brokers. And some have changed from investors to brokers. Okay, can you tell me about it? That is.
Or first of all, how many people like this are there, and what's the ratio? Secondly, what kind of traits do these people have that make them willing to go solo? I think when you talk about becoming an investor, it can be broken down into a few aspects. First, let's separate residential real estate from commercial real estate. In residential real estate, a lot of agents are dealing with clients who aren't necessarily investors. They're mostly just home buyers. Right, so I was a residential real estate agent for about a year. And honestly, most residential agents don't really know much about investing. They sell a lot of houses, but they don't have that concept down. Even if they do know about investing, they're usually focused on buying single-family homes. Yeah, it's not that it's bad. It's just that it's a different kind of product. The audience for single-family homes is mainly regular home buyers, right? It's just not the same. But with commercial properties, it's a whole different ballgame. I realize these two are actually completely different worlds. Investors and business professionals handle larger, complex projects. Buying land or a warehouse costs about $100,000 upfront. No one helps cover it. Changes depend on the person. Well, the renovation and construction of the community, 44 houses, my initial cost is already $100,000 US. I paid for these. I didn't say that I couldn't find someone to pay for it because no one was willing to help me with this play. So there's always risk involved, right? So it requires more expertise. Thanks for that. Now, going back to the role, change. You mentioned, I think it really depends on the person. After I got into investing, I realized that investors and agents are two different roles, and the skills needed for each are quite different, because an agent is primarily in sales. As long as you know how to sell, that's all that matters. For example, if I'm selling a multi-family apartment, what I need to do is find the highlights. The location has a lot of growth potential. Write that as all you need. As for whether it's profitable or not, honestly, I don't know, and I don't really need to know. I remember when I was an agent, every project I sold, I thought it was a losing deal. I was like, who in their right mind would invest in this? But then, they all ended up making money. Yeah, it was my own issue, really. A very typical example is when a client once asked me, Tim, I sold a furniture store, but he's in a 1031 exchange, and I want to buy a multi-family apartment. Do you have any options for that? We have off-market apartments. It was really expensive, so I showed it to the client. My boss was downstairs, and I said, look, Tim, just be honest with me. Is this thing really overpriced? Can we buy it or not? I told Mr. Liu, this is expensive, but you can buy it. After leaving the office, my boss seemed upset. I was thinking of the client's best interest. Honesty is key. Then my boss asked a soul-searching question. As an agent, I must consider the client's needs. My boss asked, so you think it's too expensive? I said, yeah. He replied, how do you know? Whether it's profitable is another story, right? My boss hit me with a tough question, and I was confused. As an agent, I have to think about the client. I must be honest. My boss asked, so you think it's overpriced? I said, yeah. He replied, how do you know? I said, of course I know my stuff, right? We've compared so many projects, and this one is definitely the most expensive. It's really expensive, compared in the market. If others sell for $20,000 or $15,000, and mine is $160,000 or $170,000, it's overpriced. That project ended up being bought by another very experienced investor for a higher price. A few years later, they made a lot of money off it. You will find that, in fact, it is actually me who is playing tricks on him. Why? Because the reason is because it's too expensive. We compare it to the market. Vet rents will rise. The market is shaped by buyers and sellers. My perspective isn't objective. I am not responsible for clients. When asked for opinions, I stick to facts. The market isn't determined by me. It's shaped by future buyers and sellers. I can't know if something's overpriced, so my view isn't objective. I'm not responsible for clients, and saying so is irresponsible. When asked for project opinions, I stick to facts. Early as an agent, I thought I was helping clients avoid pitfalls. Being an agent requires sales skills, while investing needs comprehensive skills and capital. You might realize you were foolish, and years later, when he's regretting, you might just be in the background. He'd say, I could have jumped in back then, but that guy. Looking back, any project you could have bought was good. Being an agent and an investor requires different skills. As an agent, you need sales skills. As an investor, you need a broader skill set. First, you need money, which can come from investors or partners. Second, you need to find projects and build relationships. Third, you need a strong balance sheet to take on loans. Fourth, you need management skills to handle people. We're at a point now where you need a set of skills. First, you need money. Money can be from others. You need some cash. Build relationships for projects. Ensure a strong balance sheet for loans, leveraging your team. Management skills are crucial. We buy properties with potential, not distress, adding value to minor issues. Focus on development. In California, buying land may involve owners hesitant. What we mainly do now is buy properties that aren't exactly distressed, but rather properties that haven't fully realized their potential. For example, if a property has some minor issues, we can add value to it. Right now, our focus is mainly on development. In California, when buying land, the owner might be hesitant about building apartments. In our investments, we often run into a problem where we have connections but no projects. I said I don't have the money. Right. So how do we balance these two things? Balancing these two aspects is actually quite challenging, not to mention that every project has its own story. For example, let's talk about the Atlanta project. This self-storage. In a very upscale community, the average house price is. It's over $1 million, but before the pandemic, it was probably around $770,000 to $800,000. Now, it's over $1 million because the average home prices are so high. They don't want the self-storage business in their community, so they want to get rid of it. He asked me, can you convert this land into something that people in your social circle would want to take pictures of? And I was like, yeah, right. But honestly, I feel pretty innocent in this situation, you know? The issue is that they want me to convert part of this property, or even the whole thing, into a residential community. That way, their property values would go up. Yeah, for me, this is actually a pretty awkward situation because I didn't buy this self-storage unit to turn it into something else. Let's not even get into whether it's profitable or not. The whole thing is just a hassle. I have to go through approvals, I have to tear things down, and then I have to build. Right. Who told you to do this? The antibodies are related to the surrounding communities. It's made up of a 1,200 unit HOA community. Okay. So there's no way around it. They need me to do this. You could say that because real estate is very localized, right? If I have a bad relationship with the community, they could report me today and then do something else tomorrow. So we hope to maintain a good relationship with the local community on any project we take on. Within our capabilities, we also want to cooperate with them. So you see, this isn't something an agent needs to worry about, right? As an agent, I just focus on selling. If it doesn't sell, I don't have any costs. It's all about that sales vibe, you know? So the real deal is, real estate agents, whether they are residential or commercial real estate agents, are actually limited in number because not everyone has one. Everyone has the ability, but not everyone has the willingness. I have met several brokers who are investors who became brokers. He said investing is too exhausting. The risks are too high, and he might even lose money. So he decided not to do it anymore and just be an agent instead. Being an agent means lower overhead, right? You're just making cash. All the projects we're working on now, for me to make money, it's going to take 3, 5, or even 7 years. So figuring out how to survive in the meantime is really tough. It's all about hanging in there and pushing through. I've actually come across a few people who made that reverse switch, going from being investors to agents. It's pretty interesting, you know? I've seen some who used to do flips, for example.
Or you could say instead of doing real estate, you end up doing loans, because loans are pretty passive, right? Right, and loans.
It's the same deal, right? People jumping into being a broker have different experiences. Those I know who went from investors to agents often faced failed investments. From 2013 to 2019, if you weren't doing too badly and hit a good market, you could make money. But a few bad deals could lead to losses, souring the experience. So, why risk it when I can be an agent? It sounds better. Plus, they can tell clients, I used to be an investor, so I understand the mindset. They know where clients are coming from, making them relatable. Bad deals can turn you off investing. They lose interest. So, why not keep it light and avoid risks? Being an agent is appealing. They can say, I was an investor, so I understand the mindset. This helps them sell well. Everyone has a role, and their experiences shape unique perspectives. So, I understand you better than other agents do. He's doing pretty well with his sales too. It just goes to show that everyone has their own role, and based on their different experiences, they gradually develop their own unique perspectives.
The first few deals are really important. If you take a lot of hits right from the start, it's super easy to give up. Yeah, exactly. The first teammate might not make money, but you absolutely can't lose money. Right, especially that first deal. When you mentioned that, it reminded me of when I was in school back in 2016 or 2017 when I was looking into Bitcoin. But back then, everyone in class was talking about Bitcoin. I asked a classmate, and at that time, I was in the US, not back home. Yeah, right, that classmate of mine was helping a professor with blockchain development because the professor hired him. He was a real expert, probably the most knowledgeable person around me. So I asked him, hey, can I buy Bitcoin? Is it legit? And he was like, yeah, sure. He told me that he said it was a scam.
It's a scan. It's possible that at that time it was just a scan.
I said, okay, I have never thought about buying Bitcoin since then. Do I still have it now? A person now almost has nothing. But very little, it is equivalent to nothing. So if you don't ask him, he might buy more, yes, but, that is. But you can't blame others, you can only blame yourself. Yes, that is probably. I have experienced many such stories. So I think that although people can't make money beyond their cognition, this is.
Think long term, but in the short term, sometimes you can make some money by luck.
You've been at CBRE for 4 years. Almost 4 years. How do you feel about the economy? How many people moved into the investment track? They are competitive. Most people do it on the side, co-investing or buying small properties. In 2022, the market wasn't booming, so they didn't make a ton of money. I remember 2019, I left in early 2020.
So I went full-time into investing. But most people actually do it on the side, like co-investing or buying some small properties. Yeah, especially in 2022, the market wasn't exactly booming, so they didn't really make a ton of money. Yes, anyway, I was in 2019, and I left in early 2010, that is, 2020. In 2002, 2001, 2002, and 2002, the friends I entered with at that time all became big brokers, making a lot of money and improving themselves a lot, like you, who is ahead of the rest of the pack, Olin.
How much can you potentially earn by starting your own company, buying properties and doing value added? Or there are very few people who are like partners. Okay, basically none. Or significantly fewer.
Because doing this requires the right timing, location, people. So why were you willing to step out at that time? The reason is pretty simple. There are a few reasons. First, I felt like I wasn't learning enough. In a big company, I don't know if you have brokers, you know? I don't have any, do you? I don't know about you, but I don't really understand the whole tiered system for brokers. Oh, how is your salary structured, right? Yeah, so how the pay is divided, it usually works like this, in a residential real estate brokerage. I mean, I don't know which one, but they're all pretty similar. Generally, when you join a company, it's a 90-10th split, so it's usually an 80-20th split at most, right? The company takes 30% and you get 70%, or it could be a 70-30th split. That's pretty standard. And generally, there's a cap, like if you help earn $20,000, then everything above that is yours, right? But in residential real estate brokerages, it's not like CBRE or those big companies, not at all. If the ninth is divided like this, you earn $1 and get half of the salary. Oh, wait, it's not over yet. Weren't you part of a team? Back then, where was your team leader? So basically, if I make $1, I end up taking home just 25 cents, and I still have to pay taxes on that. So being a team leader sounds really great, right? They can just keep bringing in more people. Yeah, but they must invest their time and energy and work their way up to be a team leader, which takes a long time. So it's not like a pyramid scheme where you just keep recruiting people. Theoretically, it sounds like that, but the reality is different, especially in commercial real estate. In commercial real estate, you can't just walk in and know everything. It takes a long time. I had a really supportive team leader who had me come in every day after work from 5 to 8 p.m. to learn the ropes. I was very rewarded. My team leader at that time gave me cocoa from 5 to 8:10 every day after work. Right, he has to spend time. He can't add 100 people to QQ just for one-on-one or one-on-two chats a day. So he also needs to spend time training people. If he can't train them, he can go home for 3 hours. Training took time. If I didn't close deals, he didn't either. Theoretically doable, but not in reality. You must train others. If they lack motivation, it's tough. I grinded for a year and a half before seeing progress. Imagine that. Living off past successes. I lived at home, so it was easier. He reached out because I lived at home and wouldn't starve. Most business people, especially foreigners, take personal loans. You eat what you want, and you eat what you have. At that time, I still lived at home, so that's it. I was at home, not starving. He reached out knowing this. Business people, especially foreigners, often take loans and carry debt. They deal with this for a year or two as it's normal not to see returns. We're trading something understandable to a regular person. Carrying debt is common, and it's normal not to see returns in the first couple of years. Why? Because what we buy and sell is typically owned for 10, 20, or 30 years before selling. It's not sold daily. Single-family homes might transact more often, but commercial properties could have been bought 10, 20, or 30 years ago. Properties are usually held for a long time before selling, not daily. If it's a single-family home, the buying and selling might happen a bit more frequently, right? Yeah, exactly. But for commercial properties, the last time someone bought that place could have been 10, 20, or even 30 years ago. So we say that the sales cycle is very long, right? I open an order every 18 months, and that order was also the first time I contacted this person 18 months ago. So you see, it took me a year and a half before he considered selling the property he bought 20 years ago. Sorry, that property wasn't the one he bought 20 years ago. My first deal was actually for a property that his father bought. I meant to say it was his grandfather's property, not his dad's. His dad passed away a few years back. He was a CPA and had 10 siblings, and they were all waiting to sell the property and split the money. At the meeting I said, let's discuss this, and I walked in to find 10 people, staring at me thinking, how long will you decide? All sorts of questions came up, like, why did they choose you? I was a total newbie, and that was a really good question. Because this industry is really tough, you know. I remember when I first started going to those meetings, I would call the CSE meeting, but it was awkward to meet them. They often asked me directly, are you new? It was awkward, right? Later, I found that they only asked a few questions, so I asked these questions. Just think of how to answer, and the answer is very simple. He will ask a lot of questions. For example, he said, I think it is very simple. A good example. Why is it that sale buy? Ask me at the beginning, he said, after I sell this property, do a 1031 exchange to buy another property. I asked if the monthly payment will increase. Initially, I was clueless about calculations and felt awkward when the client asked for answers. I admitted, let me calculate that. At a fancy investor meeting, Tim asked about multifamily apartment returns. Being new, I said, hold on, let me ask my boss. I found my boss, got the info, and returned to Tim. Investors came. Tim asked about multifamily apartments, never having invested, curious about the return rate. I said I'd ask my boss. After consulting him at the event, I returned to Tim. Many think a 5% cap rate is the return rate, but it's complex. It was more than a month. My boss taught me nothing. I asked him to wait momentarily, and I went to ask my boss, who was still watching. Many people remained on his side. I found him and talked to him. Honestly, back then, my understanding was pretty shallow. A lot of people think that a cap rate of 5% means that's the return rate, but it's not that simple. The return rate is actually a pretty big topic. Well, it depends on how you calculate it, right? So, he didn't just simply say, oh, 345 is not calculated this way, so, at that time I was still very young, I didn't understand it. And then I slowly understood it. No matter how many years you have been doing it, as long as there is a way. Answer clients' questions fluently and professionally to avoid doubts. Stay confident and knowledgeable. I have 9 siblings, making 10 of us. At CBRE, if your boss assigns you to me and I ask, are you new, it's okay to admit it. Be honest, no.
I said, I came to CBRE, and your boss assigned you to me. I asked, are you new? How would you respond? If you are new, it's okay to admit it. Honestly, there's no need to lie. But generally speaking, as long as we can answer their questions professionally, they won't have any doubts. Like that 1031 exchange question, how would you answer that?
The cap rate is around 300 over 300, and it won't exceed 5%. The interest rate is 6.5%. As long as I can buy a property and get my principal back within 2 or 3 years, I'm good with that. 300 out of 300. Now the KB will not exceed 5% no matter how high it is. How can you make money? The interest rate is 6.5, right? If it is a riot in Atlanta, will it be higher in Atlanta, right? Is 7% or 8% a rate of return? It depends on how familiar I am with the person. If I can buy a property and get my principal back in 2 or 3 years, I'm good with that, as long as my cash flow is positive. Getting my money back in 3 years is great. People have different opinions on return rates. Some focus on cash flow, others on appreciation. Why did he choose to work with me? Cash flow matters more than return rate. Getting investment back in 3 years is ideal. People have different views. Cash flow versus appreciation. 2 types: market rise benefit or value increase through renovations. Defining return rate isn't simple. Why work with me? Right person, right opportunity. I asked, why me? 3 of us competed for the listing. Market rises or you add value. Return rates aren't simple. Simplifying doesn't help. Why me? As a newbie, it's about timing. What do I mean? I asked, why me? 3 of us competed. They lacked expertise. Others were more specialized. After selling, he said, a pro specialized in multifamily properties. Being a newbie, right? It's really simple. The right situation meets the right person. What do I mean by that? I later asked him, why did you choose me? At that time, there were 3 of us, and the other 2 were competing for this listing. The other 2 lacked expertise as they were from residential real estate. I knew others were more specialized than me. I asked, why choose me? After selling, he said, a professional agent, specialized in multifamily properties, used to call me, and I liked him. But when it was time to sell, I forgot his name and number. You called, so I chose you. At that moment, I was the best option available. It was luck. Often, that's how sales work. Why me? Simply, the others were worse. In the past 3 to 5 years, he often called me, calling everyone every day. He spoke very nicely and I liked him very much. When I needed to sell, I was ready but forgot his contact. Then you called. He had no better option, just me. Out of poor options, I was better. Why me? No reason, others were worse. I gained experience. It's like newbie protection, you level up. Initially, it's luck, but you have a base salary. Without it, relying on commissions is tough. Making ends meet, keeping 25% of earnings. He was in a hurry to sell, so it was me. Of course, after this project, I gained more and more experience. It's like a newbie protection mechanism. When you enter the newbie village, you level up and fight monsters. At first, it might be based on luck, but you also have a base salary, right? You have that safety net. There was no base salary, it was all commission-based, so it was 100% 1099. I was thinking about that yesterday. So, that year and a half was really tough. You're just trying to make ends meet, and without a base salary, you only get to keep 25% of what you earn. It was tough, but living at home helped. Becoming a broker seemed the only option. I avoided accounting and engineering. The 2011 job market was tough. I ended up here by chance. Becoming a broker seemed like the only option. While job hunting, I knew I didn't want to be an accountant or study engineering like you, with skills like coding. I knew nothing about that. I wasn't job hunting. The market was tough back then. I didn't look for jobs. That's how I ended up here. Like you, for example, you have a special skill, right? You know how to code and all that? I totally don't get it. So, to be honest, I didn't really look for a job back then, because I knew the market was tough. Graduating in 2011 and trying to find a job was a real challenge, so I didn't actively go out looking for work. But no matter what, whether I chose this path or it just happened, that's how I ended up here. What about your colleagues? How did they end up at this company? What were they doing before? Because you mentioned your background, but what about the others? In commercial real estate, it's mostly about the white-collar crowd. I remember our office had only 120 brokers, and about 95% or 96% of them were white. The rest are probably some Asians, and even fewer Chinese. Asians are probably all born in mainland China. I'm the only Chinese person here who speaks English as a second language, okay? Just me. So, there are 2 people who speak Chinese, but they might not be as fluent. My boss understands me, and he probably came to the US earlier. As for me, I came to the US after graduating high school, and my English back then was pretty rough, honestly. I basically had no skills, so it was just me. In CBRE, 8 offices had monthly junior broker training, called Little Broker Training. It felt like the Wolf of Wall Street. Everyone looked sharp and confident. I felt out of place. Later, I learned connections are crucial in our industry, and younger colleagues fell into 2 categories. It felt just like something out of the Wolf of Wall Street, you know? Everyone in suits, looking sharp, with that kind of elite vibe. Each person seems super confident. And I just noticed that. Why is it like this? Later, I found out that in our industry, connections are really important. The younger colleagues around me usually fell into two categories. One type is 88 is the salary of a big broker. He is already a big broker. Sorry, he is not a big broker or a big owner. Or maybe the company's executives. All go to Guangxi to get the industry, and when they grow up, this industry depends on connections. So, for someone like me who kind of stumbled into this, to be honest, I felt like part of a disadvantaged group. I was really insecure at first, but slowly I managed to break through and get involved in various projects. I started out as a residential real estate agent. I did it for over a year, and I didn't like it. I felt like the people around me weren't the kind of folks I wanted to be in touch with. At that time, I wasn't working with a boss. I was just a plain residential real estate agent, helping clients buy and sell their own homes. I definitely started out at a house flipping company for a few months. After 3 months, I realized there was money to be made in this business, so I got my real estate license and became an agent. I started selling houses, and every weekend, I was out there doing my thing. Most of my clients were just regular folks, not professionals. They were just people who had jobs and wanted to buy a home, but they really didn't know much about the process. For example, I don't like this house. Why? Because I don't like the color, right? I feel like these are not the people I want. The people around me are not the ones I want to accept. Why am I so nervous? I have a client who said to me, Tim, I want to go to see a doctor tomorrow at 9 o'clock. I said, no problem. I got to his place at 9 and he told me, Tim, hold on a second. I asked, why? He said, I just put my rice in the rice cooker and it's not done yet. I need to wait for it to cook before I can leave. Can you wait for me? I ended up waiting for 40 minutes. Yeah, that's just one example of how unprofessional it can be. These folks aren't in the same circle I want to be in, and honestly, a lot of the other agents aren't really professionals either. Some agents come in sandals, right? They come in shorts. Yes, I think. Is there any problem with looking at the long side? Is there any problem with looking at the short side? No problem. But this is not me. Isn't this the professional circle I want? I wanted to be more professional, but to be honest, I wasn't doing well at that time either because I just didn't like what I was doing. Yeah, every week during the summer, I'd go to open houses, put up signs in the morning. And by the time I got home, I'd be drenched in sweat. Then I'd shower and get ready to head back for the open house. Honestly, I just felt like, after a year, I hadn't sold a single house, and it just didn't feel like something I wanted to be doing. I was trying to find a way out. I was really desperate to escape this place, but I didn't know what to do. Then an opportunity came up when a friend of mine told me about it. He's from CBRE. And he's the former assistant of my former boss, Fa. He became a broker and started selling houses with me. He said he wanted to introduce me to his former boss, who is a very successful team leader in the business looking for a junior broker, basically an apprentice. I initially rejected him, thinking 10 years in residential real estate was needed before switching to commercial. My friend said, this guy is successful. Meet him, learn from him. I set a meeting for a week later. At least that's how I saw it. I initially turned him down, but then my friend said, this guy is really successful, you should go meet him and learn from him. So I agreed and set up a meeting for a week later. On the first day we met, I told him I wanted to learn from him. Why? Because the residential real estate agents I had been dealing with were completely different. I said, I wanted to learn from him. Why? Because the residential real estate agents I had been dealing with were completely different. Is this a custom-made suit? A very expensive watch. And some hairspray. When I saw those leather shoes, I thought, this is the image I want. This is what the American workplace looks like. It felt different from the crowd I was around, where people wore flip-flops. I was being shallow at that time. I didn't know what real estate was. I thought, he looks like success, and I want to look like that too. The first time we talked, it was fine, but the second time, we met at the CBRE office. When I got to the office, it was impressive. There were suits everywhere, and all these colleagues had such great presence. It was a room full of people who carried themselves well. The office was beautiful. I was young and didn't know much, but I was blown away by the whole atmosphere. When I went to the office, I saw a room full of suits and a room full of very good-looking colleagues, right? A room full of these people are called this. The pens were lined up neatly. I scheduled a third meeting. You still have to go through 3 rounds of interviews. I've never been through an interview before. I said to myself, I've got to find a way to work here, but that feeling just hit me. Yeah, I didn't know if I would qualify or what would happen next, but I just knew I had to come back for a third time. He told me, if you want to come here, you still have to go through 3 rounds of interviews. He said there would be 3 rounds of interviews, one with the manager, one with him, and then a third round. I thought to myself, I've never been through an interview before. I had never looked for a job before, so what was I supposed to do? I asked my friend, and he said, you should prepare 3 questions. The first one is, why do you want to work for them? That's a typical question. The second question is about your weaknesses, and the third one is about your strengths. So, I went in prepared. After I went in, I had prepared for a long time, and I even had a little cheat sheet in my hand. I got there at 8 for a 9 a.m. interview, so I had an hour to prep. The manager who interviewed me was a sharp white man. I remember entering the room, and my mind went blank. I forgot everything, but felt emotional, insisting I must join the company. The manager asked, Tim, any questions before we start? It was a polite start, but I was unprepared. Yet, eager to join, I blurted, when can I start? I felt a change was needed, fearing life would be over without this job. He just smiled. It was just a polite question, and I hadn't prepared for that at all. I thought, how am I supposed to prepare for this? But for some reason, I was just so eager to join this company that when he asked if I had any questions, I blurted out, when can I get started? I was like, when can I start working? Why did Weibo suddenly bring this up? I really feel like I want to change so badly. I thought to myself, if I don't get this job, my life is over. He smiled a little. He said, let's get everything ready first and then we'll talk. He smiled a bit, and I thought, okay, this seems alright, just treating him like a manager. Of course, this manager was sharp. He definitely wouldn't ask you straightforward questions like, what are your weaknesses, or what are your strengths? For example, if he asked about weaknesses, he might say, Michael is my best friend. If there are 3 things Tim can improve, what would they be? I thought, well, isn't that one of my weaknesses? And then he asked me, can you be honest about it? At that moment, I totally blanked out, but I figured I couldn't just make stuff up, right? So I thought of a few things on the spot. For example, I said, sometimes I feel like I work too hard and forget to take breaks, because teamwork is important. I would say, and then the second one, I said, Tim, you guys are so nice. Right? You can't. You have to learn how to say no. I know 3 things. The third one is not to be too perfect. I seem to have forgotten it. I forgot what it means. I mean, if I don't know how to say no to others, I'm not actually helping others, but I'm doing a big favor. Right, I'm doing people at this service. Am I helping them, right? It's not a service that is disservice, but it's helping, so. After the interview, I felt like the manager didn't say much, just smiled. Before I left, he asked me another question. He said, Tim, the interview is over, just go home and wait for news. But if you have any questions, I can answer them for you. I said I had a question, and he asked what it was. When can I get started? I called again. To be honest, I felt that the interview in the middle might not be that important. It was mainly those 2 answers that got me in, right? So I really wanted to feel it at that time. I felt that my life depended on this. If I didn't get it, I'd be done for, but it wasn't all that dramatic. The economy was tough back then, and I was crying every day, really. I mean, I got yelled at by my boss, and it was tough. Sales requires a certain mindset, because this is a sales position. You need some models, you need some, this needs some, you need some what? You need some middle school second year. You need, whether you say persistence or you say China. You need it. In fact, it is. You really need that drive. If you don't have that spirit, it's going to be tough to keep going.
Oh, okay, so basically, all your colleagues, who are new, just like you, don't get paid before they start making deals. No salary, usually no pay at all. Okay, unless they start as analysts. Analysts do get a salary, but if it's not a sales position, then it's just seeing through it. If it's not from a family support like you, well, my family needs food to eat. Nothing special about the weather. Chopsticks, live, yes. The bus you bought, you need to pay postage. Yes.
It's also very hard, but at least I don't want to die. Okay, what about other people? I feel that the proportion of Americans living at home may not be as high as that of Chinese. Most Americans, as I just mentioned, are actually second generation, that is, they came in through modal relationships, so their families still have some support. If you don't have knowledge, there are ways to manage. Some take personal loans, which can be stressful like credit cards. We had a successful colleague from North Carolina. In '08, he drove to California for a job, initially sleeping in his car. A manager noticed and asked why he was early. He said he slept in his car. So, when short on cash, everyone has their tricks to get by. Back in '08, he drove from North Carolina to California for a job. He slept in his car. A manager noticed him and asked why he was always early. He admitted he slept in his car. The manager let him stay at his place for 6 months. When short on cash, you have to be creative. Sleeping in your car or office is fine, but you can't starve. In this field, borrowing money is common because company costs are high. When short on cash, get creative, sleep in your car. Borrowing money is part of the job. You can sleep in your car or crash in the office, but don't starve. In this work, Borrowing money is part of the deal. The company's costs are high too. In commercial real estate, they invest in databases and computers, which are expensive. I remember CBI data showing hiring a broker costs $75,000 a year. With the company, it's a 50-50 split. Yeah, they have to provide you with computers. And those databases are super expensive, right? So, I remember when I was there, at least during my time, CBI had this data that said hiring a broker costs them about $75,000 a year. In a year, let's say, for us, for example, with the company, we won't even get into how we split things within our team, but with the company, it's a 50-50 split, right? So, that means, if I don't help the company make $75,000, it's like, if I don't generate $150,000 in commission this year, the company is losing money, right? So, for the company, there are costs involved too. You have to make sure the company breaks even. What kind of deals can you do to earn $150,000? I mean, it's all about what kind of properties or commissions you're dealing with. For example, if I'm a property owner selling a property, let's say a random figure, usually around 2 to 3 million. Let's just say 2 million for simplicity. If it's 2 million, 5% is 100,000 US dollars. 100,000 US dollars. If I make 100,000 US dollars, representing both buyers and sellers to make 100,000 US dollars. Sharing with the company makes it 50,000 US dollars. If I represent only the seller, not the buyer, many agents do this. Usually, agents handle both sides. In commercial real estate, buyers often seek a listing agent instead of bringing their own broker. About 90% of listings are dual agency. Why? It's simple. When buying, most buyers are professionals and don't need a buyer's agent. Going to the listing agent is better for them to earn on both sides. This happens in residential real estate too. I go to you for a listing because of an industry secret. Most buyers are professionals and don't need a buyer's agent. Going to the listing agent is better for making money on both sides. He doesn't need a buyer's agent. Listing agents can profit from both sides, which is common in some areas. Most buyers, however, need guidance. I live over there, maybe in Silicon Valley or similar places with strong listings, but usually, people don't make money on both sides. If someone wants a specific house, then yes, but it's limited to a few places, especially in a hot seller's market. It's rare. I've done it. I wanted a house and asked, "Can you represent me?"
It should be pretty rare. I've done that before too. There was a house I really wanted, and I asked, "Can you represent me as well?" Like, "Can you help me out a bit more?" Right? So, yeah, that happens. But the problem is that most people buying real estate aren't professionals. They still want to find someone to represent their interests and help them navigate the process.
Yeah, in 3D spaces, this kind of thing is pretty rare, so usually, no need to master the methods yourself. So, even if I make $100,000 on both sides, I have to split that with the company, right? You need to close those kinds of deals, and you need to close 3 deals. But in theory, you need to close 6 deals. Why? Because
You know I still have to split with my dad. I mean the company has its questions about the policies. Theoretically, I should be closing 6 big deals, right? It's not that simple, you know? Yeah, exactly. So, if you close one deal for $100,000, you keep $25,000 for yourself. Place 4 orders, earn 100,000 yuan.
deals take time. First may take 1.5 years. Tough start, 2 to 4 deals in the first year. Career picks up after 4 years. Early years are tough, earning about $200,000.
Anyway, it was really tough at first, so in your first year, you might only close a couple of deals, maybe 2 or 3. At most, right? Yeah, so if you've been in the business for 4 years, that's when things start to look up for your career.
In California, $120,000 isn't much. It's about making a living. The most important thing is the experience, industry understanding, and connections. In California, when you say $120,000, honestly, that's not a lot of money. With taxes, you barely have enough left to pay rent. If you have any money left over, it's just enough for food, so it's really just about making a living. It's really an important fee, but for me, I think the most important thing isn't the money, it's the experience, the understanding of the industry, and the connections. Those connections are key. So, when you eventually branch out on your own, you can get the ground running. Private equity work is unique. Not a career switch, but a different game. You handle funds and investors. As an investor, I was unsure. I wanted to invest, reach the end, and try. I sought guidance, but no one helped. A client's kid was around. His dad, Coco, was my first client. The kid is neither rich nor poor, just in between. I was hoping to have an experienced investor guide me, you know? But it seemed like no one was willing to take me under their wing, and I couldn't find anyone. Then, I happened to have a client whose kid was around. His dad was one of my first clients, Coco. And the rich kid, well, I wouldn't really call him a rich kid, you know? It's just not exactly a small deal. But anyway, his dad was willing to support him financially. He had just graduated from college and lacked real-world experience. That would be awkward as I don't know either. Haven't you been doing this for 4 years? As an agent, not an investor. Investing confuses me too. Handling money scares me. It was awkward. We need to grow together. He approached me several times and I initially refused. I didn't understand it and he knew even less. He was only 24 or 25. I worried he'd get scammed. After rejecting him, I decided to try. We bought 2 small properties to test the partnership. It worked well, so we officially partnered and bought more properties, even setting up a. I said, no way, initially. I thought, why not try? We bought 2 small properties to test the partnership. It worked well, so we officially partnered and bought properties more seriously. We faced ups and downs, and he was persistent. He was a grad student in real estate, fresh out of school with little experience. After buying those properties, we saw it was working. We faced ups and downs. He was persistent after rejections, with little social experience. As a real estate grad, he focused on studies, just graduated. He lacked real-world experience. So he came to me. Limited options led us to try 2 properties, which he specialized in real estate and was new, lacking social experience. He came to me and we tried properties, which went okay. Gradually, we worked on more projects. We started in 2019, and by 2021, the market bounced back, letting us buy many properties. We took it slow, and it came together. We hit a good time collaborating in 2019. In 2020, we didn't buy properties. In 2021, the market bounced back, and I bought many properties. Investing often relies on luck. We were lucky buying and selling projects. After May 2022, our industry felt the impact of rising interest rates. Investing is luck-based. We were lucky for 2 years. Post-May 2022, interest rate hikes hit us. Our top deal, $9 million. We've sold a lot and projects are good. After May 2022, our industry felt the impact as interest rates rose too quickly. Everyone in our field has been affected. Mostly bad news. Biggest deal? Around 9 to 25 million. How many units? So all of us in this industry or anyone doing what we do have been affected, right? There's not much good news, just a lot of bad news, right? What's the biggest deal you've done so far? Up until now, it's around 9 million, give or take. A place worth about 25 million, how many units are there? Think about more than 400. No, in California, 40 to 50. Are enough? It's called no, not that big, but for us, all of our company's sweet spot. Projects, the size is about 8 million to more than 20 million. We're more professional than casual investors. We focus on projects from 800,000 to over 25 million. Mainly, we stick to that size range. Investors in smaller properties often have their main business elsewhere, like making money in their primary job and looking for a place to park cash. But case by case, we mainly focus on projects in the range of 800,000 to 25 million. Oh, let me ask you something off topic. If we're talking about really small deals, like below 800,000 or even below 500,000, you guys wouldn't be interested, right? So who would be? Generally, we wouldn't want to touch those, especially if they're in the outskirts. Because if it's a smaller deal, my costs are higher. Many people have their own businesses. Besides their main job, they might earn from their job but need a place to park cash. Real estate needs knowledge. Bitcoin is speculative. Real estate is stable. Successful people pick real estate. They pay a premium. Real estate is the preferred choice for those seeking stability. You can't go to an investment court and talk about it. You always have to put your money somewhere. You can't leave it in the bank. If you really had $8 million, you wouldn't buy Bitcoin, would you? You might buy a little, like $100, but that's just a speculative move. Most of your money is still going to end up in real estate. So it is generally the businessmen whose main business is quite profitable, who have money and need to invest in a relatively stable asset. So they will buy these real estates, and when they buy real estates, they are willing to pay a relatively high premium. He doesn't get it, so I'll risk more. Money's what counts. Tim said Bitcoin's speculative. Not me. Most shouldn't hold large assets in it. A little's fine. I don't have any now. Might later. Properties mainly in California. Your focus. Also in Seattle, medium-sized apartments, 58 units. Plus 2 properties, a self-storage and an apartment. In North Carolina, 3 self-storage units, sold 1. And 2 in Colorado, bought out of state before. But during the pandemic, it was too intense. Now, focus is back in California. We'll adjust investments slowly, right? Times have changed and we need to embrace that. Most properties are in California, right? California is your main focus. We also have some in Seattle and a few medium-sized apartments, about 58 units, right? 2 properties, 1 self-storage, 1 apartment. We have about 58 units, okay? So that's roughly 2 properties, 1 self-storage, and 1 apartment. We also have 3 self-storage units in North Carolina, sold 1, and 2 in Colorado. So we did buy some out of state before, but to be honest, during the pandemic, it was just too intense. We went out of state to buy, but now our main focus is really in California. Most of our efforts are concentrated there.
Yeah, okay. I don't really get it. What's it like doing apartments in California? Because I've heard a lot about people doing it in Hangzhou, but we're doing it in Lanzhou. So there aren't many of you guys doing it, huh? I'm just thinking, you have so many tenants to manage, right? You have to handle that yourself. Do you deal with a lot of tenants or have to go head to head with the government and courts? Do you run into those common issues where people say they get taken advantage of by tenants? Yeah, it definitely happens. A lot of people don't really understand this. Many think that investing in Lanzhou is risky.
For example, the properties we have in Seattle and Lanzhou. Yeah, a lot of people think investing in apartments in Lanzhou is really risky, but honestly, I don't think so. In fact, I prefer it there. My two favorite markets are California and Washington State. Why? Because it's pretty simple. The entry barrier is quite high. Joining a unit costs 400 to 500K, right? Rarely below 200K. Foreign investments are everywhere. Prices have risen. In Atlanta, hardly anything is below 100K, right? So back in 2017, I came to Coach Park near the airport, and there were about 20,000 units there. Now, it is at least 100,000 yuan, so how should I put it? The threshold is relatively high, and we will also encounter the so-called run control touch problem, and the law is more biased towards tenants, but in fact, we have hundreds of people, hundreds of tenants. Rent issues rare. In California, demand exceeds supply, prices high. Low supply raises prices despite population loss. Essential apartments, high demand, rising rents. Pre-pandemic, inflation 3%, rents rose 5 to 7%. Trend continues. Risk is a business cost. California's low supply keeps prices high. Essential apartments have high demand, so rents rise. In California or Seattle, most pay rent in smaller complexes. So why do home prices and bids keep rising? It's due to low supply. That's why we're focusing on essential apartments. Demand is high, rents rise. Before the pandemic, inflation was 3%, rents rose 5 to 7%. In California or Seattle markets with smaller apartment complexes, most pay rent. Few don't pay rent, manageable. Also, in California, the laws are complex. There's state control, and each city has its own regulations. We have local knowledge. In California or Washington, with these smaller apartment complexes, the people who pay rent are definitely in the majority compared to those who don't. Well, it's a minority, so it's still okay. And in California, the law is more complicated. It's controlled by the state. And each city has its own control. Well, if there are many. Actually, we have some more regionalized knowledge anyway. There are definitely some properties we definitely want to avoid, right? Like Oakland, for example, for sure. We know about the issues there, so we deliberately steer clear of those. But there are certain areas that are relatively friendly to landlords, where the rules are fairer for property owners. As you might be aware, not every place is that bad. It's a balancing act. Despite common issues, there are benefits. Let's discuss property taxes. If you buy a property in Austin for $1 million, your tax might be around $20,000. Next year, it's still $20,000. If the property doubles in value, this has happened before, where the value might just double. For example, the problem of local tax, right? Tax okay, local tax problem, local tax, aha, for example. For example, buy one in Aosin. Let's say you buy a property for 1 million this year, and you say the property tax is 20,000, right? Let's assume that the property tax is 20,000, but it will be 20,000 next year. Okay, then if the property doubles next year, this has always happened, and the first time it may be doubled. There are two sides to this, and it can really spike. We could see a 50% or even 100% increase because it's tied to the property value, right? But in California, we have what's called Proposition 13, which states that as long as you don't sell your property tax can only increase by a maximum of 2% each year, no matter how much the property value goes up. So if taxes are a significant cost, this is a big deal. It's been a few years, so in a few years, you won't see much of a difference. But after 5 years or more, in 6 years, it could be like 30 years. Sold one property, and that property was a So now we're talking about a 40-unit apartment. This was a long time ago, and we were looking forward to some things. When we sold that property, its market value was around $18 million, but the original owner was actually paying $500,000 in taxes. When it comes to property taxes, just think about how much you actually pay in taxes, right? Exactly. So that's one of the benefits of this model. Another advantage is that California is relatively dry. So when you look at properties like in Atlanta or Texas, to be honest, properties from the 80s are considered to be quite old because of the humidity, which drives up maintenance costs. But in California, honestly, it's pretty normal to see properties from the 60s. This is also because it's drier here, so the holding costs like maintenance are lower. The repair costs are lower too, so properties are generally in better shape. If you take care of them well, in particular, they can last a long time, in general. There are definitely clear benefits that people often miss. California is known to be expensive, and there are valid reasons for that, right? Logically, the high prices make sense. For instance, we have a 60-unit senior living complex, and the market price is approximately $22 million. Costs $12 million to build. Once completed, if I were to purchase a property for $22 million, theoretically, the tax would be based on that amount. However, in this case, the tax is calculated on the construction cost. So, essentially, I built a property valued at $22 million, but the tax is calculated around $1.2 to $1.3 million. But since I'm developing the property, my property tax is actually based on the construction cost. So basically, I built a property worth $22 million, but my property tax is actually calculated around $1.2 to $1.3 million, and it can only increase by 2% each year. Consider how much you can save on property taxes. It only increases by 2% annually. This is significant savings if you sell a property for $25 million with a development cost of 12.
Yeah. By the way, selling something for $25 million when it only costs $12 million to build, that's certainly not just a typical margin. You've hit a good market, right? So generally speaking, how much can you make from building?
Under normal circumstances, when we look at a project, like when we buy any project, if it's a development project, we generally hope for higher profits because the risks are a bit greater. So for development projects, we usually aim for at least a 25% to 30% profit each year in California. I feel like the annual return should be at least over 20, right? It really depends on the money and how it flows. If the capital cost is from investors, we want it to be higher because investor costs usually range from 13 to 15%. Surprisingly, when it comes to development, the high end is around 13 to 20%. If it's your own money, then you might not see that kind of return, right? So basically, you're looking at an annual return of at least 20 to 30%, right? That's because of what happened in 2020. In 2021, this situation will occur when the rent increases significantly and substantially a lot. So at that time, it was a special market. It was not considered this. It was not a normal return. Okay, for you, are there any other benefits? If you live in California, everything is pretty close, which makes things really convenient. For example, I live in California, but if I have properties out of state, it can be quite a hassle. Yeah, like just the other day, I was on a business trip from Friday until I got back, right? I was in North Carolina, and honestly, I was in this small town near Charlotte, and it was just so boring. I mean, I went out this morning. Yesterday, I didn't eat breakfast. And for lunch, I went to get some pho. For dinner, considered other options at Chick-fil-A this morning. California offers diverse food options. A basic need. Higher incomes are another advantage. Rent increases in lower-tier markets can make housing unaffordable. This is a benefit we get, and it's inevitable. What other advantages are there? Another benefit is that California's daily income base is solid. Californians earn more. Second/third-tier properties, the rent for a two-bedroom could be $800, right? For example, the original rent for a two-bedroom apartment might be $800. If you raise the rent by 125 or 30 yuan, he might not pay the rent. He might think he can't afford it. You have to raise the rent from 800 to 830 yuan, increasing by 20 or 30 euros. Okay, he thinks, I might not be able to make it this month. So he starts skipping rent because his income isn't that high. In California, though, incomes are generally a bit higher. For example, our previous rent was $2,400, right? So if you save up $200, that's like $240. Normally, if the rent is $2,400, you can raise it by 5% plus CPI, which can go up to 10%, but it can't exceed that. So if I take 10% of $2,400, that's $240. That's actually quite a bit, right? It's a significant increase, but people still pay it because they don't feel like it impacts their lives that much since they earn more. This is also an exam, meaning that for us in the long run, it's a pretty good market because the inflation is a bit higher, right?
Okay, got it.
In general, short selling in cities, or I don't know, the whole state of California, like during peak seasons when property taxes are due, or in cities where tenant laws are pretty strict, usually rent, can't increase by more than 2%. That's really low, like 2%, or 3%, which is just not enough, especially with inflation. We usually avoid those kinds of cities. Okay. So there are a lot of local laws and regulations that people from other places might not really understand. And speaking of which, California itself has its own red zones, right? Relatively speaking, Atlanta also has blue areas. Regarding Atlanta, I remember a friend of mine told me that his Atlanta seemed to be somewhere in the south. It's really tough in the cities. You can't even get the tenants out. Yeah. So there will still be issues. Okay, got it. So when it comes to your personal planning, we're still going to keep this going. Right now, we have about 25 to 27 properties, which adds up to roughly $100 million in our portfolio.
It's mainly about multifamily properties.
At that time, a company was just a company, and it was just everyone added together. Investors are coming together to invest with us. Our next step, given that the market isn't great, is pretty much the same. We're affected too. So for the next step, we want to take it slow. We still plan to move forward, just not at the same scale as before. In the past 2 years, we've mainly focused on development in California. Our goal is pretty straightforward. We want to grow our assets from 100 million to 300 million, then to 500 million, and eventually to $1 billion. In this industry, you really need to scale up. Without scale, it's tough to make money.
Yeah, right. You guys do development by collaborating with builders, not just doing it all on your own. You're only working in California, not in other states. Got it. Okay. So in California, the development can be handled internally, right?
Yeah. We also consider it internal construction. We do in-house concrete framing, so our costs are about 5% to 10% cheaper than the market. Plus, we can ensure quality and quantity in our work.
Okay, this is the point of development expression. Okay, we control when you develop, the skills.
When it comes to development, I initially thought we should just dive in. I mentioned that 60-unit apartment project. That was something he was working on when I first met him. But at first, I was actually hesitant to get into development because I thought the risks were pretty high. You don't start collecting rent right away, right? But the reason we've been doing development these past 2 years is our team has matured. Also, development has higher profit margins, and the barrier to entry is higher. For buying ready-made properties, their prices haven't dropped that much. Few lenders on-site push development. Inflation raises maintenance costs due to labor. Older properties exceed our 3% to 6% rent budget. Insurance is costly for older properties. Older properties have higher maintenance costs, and insurance is a big factor. New properties have lower rates, but older ones face high costs. Our 1950s property saw insurance rise from $350 to $900 per unit. Nowadays, it's not about the rent anymore as labor costs and various expenses are going up. Also, insurance. New properties have lower insurance rates, a definite plus. But for a lot of older properties, insurance companies hesitate to cover them or charge high rates. Take our property from the 50s as an example. Professor Young. When we bought it in 2019, the insurance was $350 per unit each year. Now it's $900, 3 times as much. Can you believe that? It hasn't even been a few years. So I can understand why they might not want to take on those properties, right? That's why we talk about development. It has its advantages. The first benefit is property tax. The tax base is relatively low, right? For 22 million, we're looking at 12 to 13 million in property taxes, and it can only go up by 2% each year. That's one thing. Another benefit is that insurance is cheaper and easier to get. The third thing is this 15-year new property in California is touchless. Within 15 years, the laws regarding my property and the cases are strict. I can't really say how the city handles it because I haven't dealt with those areas. I don't want to get into a debate about it, but I believe there aren't any touch points. Regardless, I don't work on projects in those areas. I only focus on places where the laws are more favorable. So, for properties under 15 years, there are no touch points. That's definitely a benefit, right? Another thing is that my management costs are lower, Just think about it. In Atlanta, the normal management cost of an apartment in Texas is the lowest, and it will never exceed 45%. Under normal circumstances, it's usually between 50 and 55%. There are various reasons for this, like property taxes, higher maintenance costs, and the difficulty in finding supermarkets. Anyway, the bottom line is that for every $10 you collect in rent, from $15 to $5.50. It's about operating costs, right? And this doesn't even include the loan you can only borrow around $4 to $5, right? So that's the expense ratio. Yeah, over here I see it's about 50 to 55%. Do you know what our real expense ratio is in a new capacity? 27%. That's a lot of difference, right? 50%, 22%, 17. A lot of difference, right? So you think, isn't it better for me to do development here? There are various reasons for development. The risks and profits are high. Developing houses in California is riskier than in other places. In Texas, approvals take 3 to 6 months, but here it can take 1.5 to 2 years. We have some development projects and just closed on one. It's really tough to get approvals here. It's not easy at all. In California, for example, in Texas, you might get your approval in 3 to 6 months, right? But here it can take a year and a half to 2 years, and there's no guarantee that everything will go smoothly. Various issues can pop up. Okay, so now, we also have a development project that we just closed on around the end of the year. We can build about 40 apartments or so. Okay, if we close by the end of the year, when do you think the approval will be done? When I get to that city, we're pretty familiar with it, so I think it'll take about a year to a year and a half, conservatively speaking. Okay, so that's about a year to a year and a half for the approval process, and then another year and a half for the project itself, so roughly 3 years, right? Okay, yeah, about 3 years. When I tell a lot of my friends, especially those in Texas, they find it unbelievable.
This is very normal in California. That's why. That's who Elon. He's doing that.
The Department of Government exaggerates things. It's really bureaucratic. Everyone should check out your Zaihongshu account. Thanks. Oh, and follow Xiaosu for useful info. It might take about 2 weeks just because there are all sorts of things going on. Okay, it's really, really bureaucratic, right? So, is there anything else you want to say? No, everyone should definitely check out your Zaihongshu account. And put it up later, right? All right, thanks. What was it again? Oh, and everyone can follow Xiaosu. I think I share a lot of useful info there. Quite a lot of people like it. I should put it this way. I think my little red book is one of the few that likes it. There's definitely a lot of practical experience shared, mainly focused on commercial real estate. You should check it out, I think a lot. The people really enjoy the content. If you like useful info and some gossip, there's occasionally some gossip, but it's mostly solid info. Right. All right, welcome everyone to Follow Teacher Team on Zaihongshu. Thank you, Xiaoshui. There's definitely a lot of useful info. The North American Commercial Real Estate Team, right? Thank you, Xiaoxiao. Sorry about today, you came so early. I had a meeting with Xiaoxiao at 7 this morning.
If you guys think our voices sound a bit tired, it might be because we got up early, like really early, at 7 in the morning. But anyway, thanks to Xiaoshui for coming. Really appreciate it. I called you yesterday, and it was like, bam! But it's all good since there wasn't much going on online, right?
Great, all right, thanks, Xiaoshui.